Alright, are you all ready for the next book of the Summer's Trilogy? I imagine not, because no one watched the first video, so I'm just really doing this one because I want to, because I actually like these books. Anyway, we are on to the next book of the Summer's Trilogy, Inquisition. And if you've missed what happened at the end of book 1, here we go now. So at the end of book 1, Fletcher and friends were competing in the school tournament to try to beat the rich assholes before they could basically come up with a plan that would usurp one of their friends' family's money, because no, they're not born nobility, they're just somewhat rich and were about to buy their way into nobility, and they didn't like that, so they were working on a plan with their father to fuck with them. Fletcher and friends stopped that before Fletcher was arrested for the shit he started at the beginning of book 1, where he kind of might have burned the face of the local noble asshole who was causing a fight with him and about to stab him to death with a knife. It was a case of self-defense because, the victim was a noble, medieval justice and all that stuff. Anyway, book 2 obviously picks up right after, because there's no way Fletcher got out of prison in between books, because Fletcher's straight up in jail. He's having a rough of it. Prison is, in this world, is basically just a hole in the ground where they'll just throw water and food at you every so often. And so he's just throwing water and food every so often. And it's like some time goes by. I don't know specifically, even Fletcher doesn't know specifically how much time goes by before he's sent to trial. And he's basically screwed because he has no defense attorney until Actress, the teacher / the one who found him in the first book, shows up to basically work his defense. And, it's not going well. And then it gets worse because someone runs in, gives a mistrial to the first case, because an even worse case is happening because of the shit that went down in book 1 again with the soldiers that Fletcher and gang had to escape from. And Fletcher gets in even more trouble because of that, because it's a more serious crime that can be tantamount to treason. And they also drag Othello, Fletcher's dwarf friend from the first book, into the whole mess. They were about to drag the elf girl into it, but they really can't because she's elf royalty, so they just get the dwarf. And really, this whole trial is just an excuse to, 1, kill Fletcher, because he might be the bastard of some rich noble asshole and his wife doesn't like his bastards, and 2, kill the dwarf and make racial tensions between humans and dwarves even worse, so they have an excuse to bring down even worse shit upon the dwarves. So yeah, this is all a giant flag operation to get 2 people killed and make everything worse for everyone. But Fletcher decides, in order to save his friend and protect the peace, he decides to take the die for the whole crime and get himself executed. But at the last minute, he is saved by the school's weapon master, who I didn't mention because he's a side character. He comes in and claims that Fletcher is a noble by birth, because if he's a noble, he will be freed of his crimes, get a pardon from the king, because nobility, especially if he's the last one of his house, which he is supposed to be, he's said that Fletcher is the lost son of the Rayleigh family. I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry. And basically the entire family, as we learned in book 1, was killed by orcs who invaded their territory, because their home is next to the orc front line with their jungle. And so Fletcher is supposedly the son of that family. So they decide to come up with a way to test this, because they don't have DNA testing in this world yet. So they decide, hey, the Rayleigh family's immune to manticore venom, right? And they said, yeah, stick them with that and see what happens. And they do. It's like, because if he's not a Rayleigh, he'll die. But if he is a Rayleigh, he'll almost die. Either way, Fletcher gets close to death and almost dies and gets knocked out again. But he survives the trial. He's actually a noble son by birth, even if he wasn't raised. And he was given a pardon by the king because, noble by birth, last of a house, can't really kill you because all that territory and that kind of stuff. And then he learns of another thing. That this is literally almost immediately, because he learns of a mission by the king to send a bunch of kids into the orc jungle because they have word that some super important noblewoman has been captured or has been held by the orcs for years, and they want to go and save her. So Fletcher kind of sort of volunteers to go on this mission because he has nothing else to do, and if he didn't, we wouldn't have a plot. As well as partially to get away from his troubles because he's still but it's also because he wants to help improve racial relations in a way, because newfound nobility and all that kind of stuff, and as a favor to the king, because it turns out isn't that bad of a guy. He's just kind of stuck in that icky political situation caused by his pretty much an asshole father who's the king before him. Yes, he's the current king, but the previous super racist king is technically still in charge and still in power. So what does Fletcher do from here in between leaving prison and the mission? Well, he decides to go home, get some people, go check out his new territory, which was destroyed in the orc raid as mentioned before, and try to work to restore it, which leads to some pretty cool moments of just like Fletcher exploring what would have been his family home and stuff like that. It's honestly kind of touching. But it's just the big part of the story is the mission in which they explore the orc jungle, because that's super big. They also spend a little bit of time, actually, no wait, that's the next book, sorry. So they explore the orc jungle, and that's super good because the orcs were basically a background element of the last story, just an excuse about why they needed so many battle mages. But now we're actually exploring that. We're fleshing out the orcs and learning about them in this super dangerous jungle. And it's kind of cool, but we still have to deal with the asshole humans, and Fletcher and friends have to deal with some sabotage that's brought them on that leaves them supplyless for a minute, and then they need to go hunting for more supplies. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting world building in this book for this world, and overall it's a fun read. The characters, which were the draw for me for this story, are still as good as they were when I first read it, or at least as good as the last book. The reveal of Fletcher's noble birth feels kind of random because it literally comes at the end of an almost impossible situation, but it was semi-hinted at in the last book. Like it felt like a brick to the face when they brought up the Rileys, and it feels like, this is going to be important for some reason later. But it does lead to some interesting stuff, such as Fletcher coming to terms with his birthright, as well as the mission and stuff like that. Again, fleshing out the orcs and their whole society and the goblins and stuff, that was a pretty cool thing. They're technically the main antagonist of the story, or at least one of the two main antagonist factions of the story. And, obviously we don't want to start off with the super evil orcs in the very beginning, so we had the nobles, and now they're coming in to take their place as the actual big bads. We explore their society, learn of some ancient prophecy about an albino orc, and that'll be important for the next book. And the nobles are still around being prideful assholes, so that stuff is going on, and the political world is still somewhat fascinating. It's kind of super obvious, but the political quagmire that this world is in is interesting in its own way. Now, overall, this is an entertaining one. I enjoyed rereading it, and yeah, gonna dive into the final book relatively soon in order to end the trilogy. I know there's a prequel, but I honestly don't care that much about the prequel. It's just gonna be another prequel that sets up stuff that was explored in the trilogy. So yeah, see you all in the next one.